Have you ever swallowed your anger because you were afraid of expressing it or how it would be received? Do you find it easier to fight for someone else's rights than to assert your own needs and boundaries? Have you ever judged yourself as bad or unspiritual just because you felt angry? Do you secretly fear that if you truly expressed your anger, it would damage your relationships? We've all been taught explicitly or subtly that anger is a negative emotion, something to be wary of, something to be careful with. We're told anger is destructive, it's low vibe, and many of us were shamed for being angry as children. From childhood, most of us were told to calm down, right? Don't make a scene, or take it easy, or stop being so emotional, particularly if you're a woman. And in the workplace, anger is labeled as unprofessional. And in relationships, it's perceived as volatile and unstabilizing. And in spiritual teachings, it's often dismissed as low vibration. So it's no wonder that so many of us, particularly women, either suppress our anger until it eats away at us from the inside, or it spontaneously erupts in ways that hurt ourselves and others. So in this episode, we're going to talk about anger and why it has been so misunderstood, because it's time to stop fearing it and start seeing it for what it truly is, which is sacred and healing and wise. We're going to unpack anger so you can stop being afraid of your rage and start embracing it as your birthright. And hopefully after this episode, you can begin to build a loving and healing relationship with your anger, because that is its purpose. It is a healing emotion, and people do not understand that. People are so quick to label anger as toxic or destructive, while at the same time, chronic stress, anxiety, and even burnout are normalized. This is the backward nature of our culture and society, and it's a representation of how emotionally immature and unintelligent we really are at large still. Most people do not have a healthy relationship with their emotions and so do not fully understand them, and that's particularly true for anger. But anger is not a flaw in the human design. It's not a spiritual defect, and it's not evidence that you're failing to embody your highest self. Anger really is a sacred messenger of the highest intelligence. It's one of the most honest signals your body and your nervous system can give you. It always tells you when something precious, like your safety, your sovereignty, your sense of love, has been threatened or neglected or diminished. And that is information you need. So every time anger rises, it's actually pointing you toward unmet needs, boundaries that were violated or unspoken, suppressed sovereignty, unfelt grief, and love you didn't receive or love that you haven't given yourself. So when you start to understand anger not as a liability or a personality flaw or weakness, but rather as a compass toward your liberation, toward your power, toward greater love, you're going to start to see it as the powerful healing ally that it is. And then you gain access to the wisdom and love that it contains and it protects. Because embracing your anger is not only safe, but it's really truly essential if you want to live freely, more coherently, and fully alive. So I'm doing this episode because I have recently developed a deeper relationship with my anger. If you've been listening to my recent episodes, you know that I recently experienced a traumatic event where all of my repressed childhood sexual abuse, trauma, and all my suppressed childhood fears spontaneously surfaced at the same time in relationship. It was the most intense experience I've had in my life outside of my husband's death. And that's really how traumatic it was, just to see all of that horrifying trauma, as well as all of those fears manifest at the same time for days. It was a lot, to say the least. But now that I've healed that trauma, I am now able to begin healing the repressed traumas and the suppressed fears that surfaced, which surfaced because they want to be healed. And in this layer of my healing, there is so much anger Because sexual abuse, particularly when you're a child, is essentially a gross violation of boundaries, of safety and sovereignty. And so I have been confronting and releasing and honoring a fuck ton of anger recently. But anger is not a novel aspect of my healing. It's always been a part of my trauma responses and my defense mechanisms. And so I've known that. I've known that I've had a lot of anger for a long time that I didn't release properly, especially because I was not allowed to be angry as a child. It was an emotion that was deemed unacceptable by my parents. And yet both of my parents were always so angry. But yeah, I had a lot of anger that needed to be processed and released. But at this stage of my healing and at this level of coherence, and what I'm actively healing right now, I perceive this layer of anger so differently than the anger that I've processed in the past, especially, even in the healing that I did like 5 years ago, because I have made so much authentic peace with myself. I have identified so deeply as my highest self now, and I have practice unconditional self-love and radical self-acceptance for like a decade now. And so this confrontation of this deeper layer of anger, of these violations, is different. It's softer. It's more dimensional. And so I'm learning so much about myself through acknowledging this layer of anger, through releasing this layer of it, and through loving it with softness and curiosity, that I have healed like layers of core wounds that I did not have access to before. And I feel so much more liberated than I ever have before. And so that's why I wanted to do this episode. I think anger is one of the most misunderstood emotions. It's so common in everybody, and yet one of the most suppressed and repressed emotions and denied emotions in us. We live in a culture and society where suppression of our sovereignty, of our liberties, of our individuality, of our authenticity, our well-being are so normalized through normalized struggling, normalized chronic stress, normalized hustling, normalized codependency, normalized people-pleasing, normalized shrinking ourselves to fit into norms, normalized settling for less than we all want, and normalized powerlessness and waiting for external validation. And the normalization of the suppression of our sovereignty and our liberties and our individuality and our authenticity and our well-being, like inherently means that we all have a lot of anger, because that is a natural response to our sovereignty, our well-being, our authenticity being suppressed. Anger is natural, but we don't treat it that way. We vilify it. And that's why so many people, particularly women, are living with decades and mountains of suppressed anger. And also why so many people also have unexpressed grief and needs that continue to be unmet, boundaries that continue to be walked all over, and love that is unexpressed and unfelt and unreceived, because anger is the gateway to all of that. So let's unpack why anger is the gateway to all of that by starting with the biology of anger. Because anger, again, is not like a moral failing. It's not proof that you've lost control of yourself. Anger is one of our most ancient survival emotions. Like fear, like sadness, and joy, it is hardwired into the human nervous system. Anger is a part of your body's built-in fight or flight stress response. When your brain perceives a threat, whether it's a physical danger, being emotionally disrespected, or your boundaries being ignored, your amygdala lights up like an alarm system. And then your body starts preparing you to protect yourself, to take action, to stand for what matters. So anger is that protection. And while most people perceive anger only in its outward expression, right? The raised voice, the clenched fists, at its core, anger is actually a messenger. It is your nervous system's way of saying, hey, something here is threatening my well-being, my values, or my sense of safety. So anger is less about aggression and really more about information. It's a signal flare pointing you to an unmet need, a boundary that was crossed, or a place where your sovereignty has been suppressed, or where love was not received. So anger is not evidence that you're weak or that you are an unstable person. It is evidence that your system is working exactly as it should. You were designed with anger as an emotional radar for a reason, because without anger, you would overlook your needs that weren't being met. You would continue to give away too much of yourself. You would continue to be gaslit, undervalued, unloved. And so anger says, pay attention, protect what matters. So anger really is not destructive energy that you have to get rid of because it's low vibe. Anger is your body's sacred alert system. It is an internal compass guiding you back toward alignment, toward safety, toward love, toward your truth. So when you begin to honor anger in that way, it stops being something to fear and starts becoming one of the most reliable signals you have for living in coherence with your highest self. So if anger is sacred and necessary, then why is it so misunderstood? Why does anger feel so dangerous for so many people? Why does it get under our skin and make us uncomfortable? Well, firstly, anger is a motivational emotion. It energizes you, so that's why your heart races, your muscles tense, and sometimes, it feels like you're going to burst, right? Implode. That's the mobilization aspect of anger. It wants you to take action to protect yourself. That is your nervous system flipping into sympathetic overdrive, right? That's your body engaging survival mode. Now, when anger gets stuck, because it remains unprocessed, unexpressed, unfelt, unreleased, and thus unresolved, you not only end up stuck in survival mode because emotions don't just go away because you suppress them or you don't want to feel them or acknowledge them. That energy, of course, remains in you because you haven't released it. That then means that you also have chronic high cortisol, constant muscle bracing, right? You're just constantly tense all the time. Your breathing is shallow and you have a mind that is very easily activated, easily angered because it has not yet fully settled into safety. That's a major reason why anger gets a bad rap, because people are harboring so much unexpressed anger that when they do get activated, they get angry, right? And it comes out in unpredictable ways because they're already wound up so tight. They have already been bracing and they're already so tense and they've been trying to contain anger for years and decades. And so their nervous systems are exhausted, which means that when they do get activated, they are dysregulated. And so that anger surfaces in a dysregulated way, meaning yelling, outbursts, aggression, or collapse. And then people think anger is the problem, but anger is not the problem. The real issue is that we have been conditioned to deal with anger through suppression. So many people swallow their anger and then it just turns inward, right? That's why suppressed anger can show up as depression, as physical conditions, even autoimmune stress. So anger only becomes destructive when it's suppressed, when it's ignored, or when it is expressed without awareness and without regulation. Because that suppressed anger has turned inward into shame and resentment and self-loathing and chronic stress. And that just erodes your nervous system over time, leaving you depleted and leaving you disconnected from yourself. And then when anger is expressed without awareness and without regulation, that is when it can harm relationships. And that's when it can escalate conflict. You've probably heard the advice, right, to just go blow off steam somewhere else where you're supposed to hit a pillow, scream into a pillow, or vent until you don't feel angry anymore. So to be clear, punching a pillow, screaming into a pillow does help to utilize the mobilization energy of anger, right? But decades of research have shown that aggressive venting and rumination do not actually reduce anger. It actually intensifies it. So that means that movement helps release the energy of anger, not talking about it until you feel like you're no longer pissed off. Because when you just ruminate from an angry place, you're just reinforcing your body's arousal state, meaning keeping your cortisol levels high And actually, you just like prime yourself to get angry or faster the next time you get activated because you haven't physically released the mobilization energy. You're just like cognitively processing it. So that's another reason why anger gets a bad rap. It's like people suppress it and they think that I'm just going to talk about my anger and it's going to go away. No, friend, you have to move in order to regulate. Anything that brings that state of stress down and arousal down is going to help you move through and with your anger healthfully. And so after moving your body to utilize that mobilization energy, that is why your muscles are tense. They are primed for movement. Then you have to immediately like regulate to complete the stress cycle and let your body know you're safe. This is productive anger regulation and processing. And that is when your nervous system makes space for you to hear, to understand what the anger is really trying to tell you. If you've been doing the work but still feel stuck, like no matter how much healing, manifesting, or personal growth you invest in, or spiritual practices you try, something just isn't clicking. You're not alone, and you're not failing. The truth is, most teachings and approaches are outdated and only scratch the surface. My book, Unconditional, You Are Perfect As You Are, helps you understand exactly why things haven't been clicking and how to resolve the root of why you're struggling. Unconditional self-love isn't just a nice idea if you truly want to be free. It's the missing piece and the foundation for everything you desire. And you don't have to do or figure everything out on your own. You deserve clear, comprehensive, and empowering step-by-step guidance in self-love, self-healing, and spiritual growth. The Source membership gives you daily support and transformative tools to actually start living your healthiest and happiest life today and every day. 100% of members who follow the program improve their mental, emotional, and physical health by over 50% in 1 year alone. Real mind, body, soul transformation is possible, and you can achieve it with joy and ease instead of stress and struggle. So as a thank you for being a listener, you can get 75% off your first month of membership with the code PODCASTPROMO. Your links are in the show notes. Now, let's get back to the episode. So you don't want to unleash anger. You have to really regulate. You have to be very aware and mindful and conscious of that energy in order to gain access to that wisdom and to release it healthfully. Because anger is not just a messenger emotion, it's an approach emotion, meaning it mobilizes you to move toward resolving the problem, to set that boundary, to demand fairness, to protect what matters to you. And that makes anger like deeply functional. It's not, again, destructive energy. It's corrective energy. And the problem is that most people are so terrified of their own anger that they never perceive it that way because they've never been shown how to express anger productively and taught that it's actually pointing us to something deeper within ourselves, meaning I have an unmet need, I have a boundary that was crossed, there was love withheld, there's grief still in me. And when that anger is ignored and suppressed long enough, it doesn't just go away because you wish it to go away. That's when it detonates. That explosive anger, that is what convinces people that anger is harmful, when really it's just anger has been misunderstood. It has not been properly regulated and released. And then there's also the social paradox that fuels the misunderstanding around anger, which is that it's more acceptable to be angry on behalf of someone else than it is to express anger for yourself. Society calls that righteous anger or noble outrage. But when you say, I'm angry because my needs weren't met, or I'm angry because my boundary was crossed, then that's deemed too much. You're deemed like selfish, inappropriate, emotional, or whatever. And I think that's because personal anger exposes vulnerability. It reveals that you have needs, that you can be hurt, that you do want love, that you do feel grief. And culturally, vulnerability has been stigmatized as weakness, as a flaw. And so we've been conditioned to channel anger outward in socially appropriate ways, like causes where you protest, you express moral outrage by defending others. But it's not okay to express it to defend ourselves. And all of that lends itself to anger being so deeply misunderstood. But I hope at this point in the conversation, you're beginning to understand that anger in and of itself is not a problem. It's not dangerous. It's unprocessed and suppressed anger that can be harmful. But anger itself is sacred. It's your nervous system's primal way of saying you matter. Something needs to change for your well-being. And so when you learn how to regulate your anger, when you learn how to understand its deeper messages, and then you act from coherence, anger becomes one of the most healing allies that you have. And it's not a threat to your spirituality. It's not a threat to your goodness. It is a gateway to greater sovereignty, to stronger boundaries, and to reclaiming the love and respect that you have always deserved. Because every single time anger arises, it is guarding something sacred about you and within you. It is, again, saying, pay attention, right? A need has gone unmet. A boundary has been crossed. A part of you has been denied. Because anger never appears in a vacuum. It always points to something essential. It always has a root. Maybe it was a need for safety that wasn't honored. Maybe it was a need for respect that was ignored. Maybe it's the deeper universal need for love that went unseen. But it's always pointing you to something essential within yourself. So you have to stop perceiving anger as a problem to get rid of, because it is a healing ally showing you exactly where your alignment needs to come back into coherence, where you do need to take greater care of yourself. And it arises to direct you back into integrity with your values, with your sovereignty, and with your needs. And so anger is ultimately an advocate too of self-love, because at the root, every wave of anger is telling you something in me deserves more care, more protection, more reverence, more love. And again, sometimes that's outward, like a boundary. But sometimes it's inward, places where you withheld love from yourself, judged yourself too harshly, failed to give yourself the nourishment and care that you need. So when you embrace anger as a gatekeeper, as a healing ally, as a self-love advocate, you do then realize that it is fiercely loyal to you. It never abandons you. It shows up again and again because it's guarding your sovereignty and your well-being. And so instead of fearing your anger or battling against it, please start to love it. Please start to thank it. Start asking your anger, what truth are you guarding from me? What love are you directing me toward? So many of us have been taught that anger is negative energy, right? Something that you have to bypass, hide, or feel guilty about. And that is just spiritual ignorance and distortion. Anger is not low vibration. It is a sacred frequency. It's a signal from your body, your mind, your soul that points you directly to your truth, showing you where precisely your sovereignty is being compromised, where your boundaries are being crossed, where you deserve more love, where love has been withheld. And so that sacred alarm is your nervous system. That's your highest self. That's your inner self, all saying something essential is at stake here. And that is deeply essential to your spirituality. And so anger is like a primal way that your soul defends its own integrity. And that integrity is also other emotions that you've been suppressing, right? This is when we're going to talk about grief. Anger is a gatekeeper for grief. And so when you have suppressed or repressed grief, anger is often guarding it, because anger is part of the grief cycle. And if you're somebody who cries when you get angry, it's probably because it's guarding grief. And I personally have accessed so much grief from releasing anger, and it has been so deeply healing and liberating. Grieving is one of the most healing things we can do, and it is very essential to authentic, lasting healing. I did a whole episode about the power of grief that explains why grief is so powerful and necessary, and yet so overlooked in healing. And you should listen to that if you haven't yet, because it is a true key to productive healing is grieving. There's so much grief and sadness underneath anger, because anger shows you where your needs have been unmet, when you did not receive love, when you should have received love. And so you need to grieve those losses in order to truly release those experiences. So anger, when you approach it consciously, meaning through reverence and regulation, and when you decode it and express it from coherence, anger is spiritual, because it is a tool for liberation, for self-respect, for relational clarity. And when you learn to listen to your anger without judgment and without fearing it, you then learn to follow its guidance system. And then you can transform that anger from a reactive, unstable force into a sacred healing ally, which is what it is intended to be. And that's how you also protect your highest truths and selves. So let's dive into how we work with anger so that it's healing and not harmful, so that you can access its wisdoms and move through it in a way that does restore your mind, body, and soul integrity and sovereignty. So to do this effectively, you're going to need to approach your anger in 3 layers. So the first step is to regulate, right? I said this before. Your nervous system determines whether you are in a healing mode or survival mode. So when you feel anger arise, you must pause. You have to become present with it instead of barreling through it. That means ground yourself, notice like your heart rate, how you're breathing, where in your body you're feeling tension. And you want to release any judgment. You want to release any thinking and thoughts. This is just about giving your nervous system permission to be fully present with the anger. And science actually shows that when you label your emotions while sensing them in your body, that actually does reduce the amygdala activation, and that allows your prefrontal cortex, which is your logical mind, to engage. So you want to name that anger and then state that you are angry, and then that's going to help you remain clear and responsive instead of reactive. And then the second step is to decode. Again, anger contains sacred data. It is a signal pointing you directly to unmet needs, to violated boundaries, missing love, or unprocessed grief. So you have to ask yourself these questions, like what boundary was crossed? What need is being unmet right now? Do I feel loved or not? And who do I need love from? And what is this anger revealing about what I deeply value about myself? And is there a loss connected to this anger that I have not yet grieved? That's going to become more automatic as you practice like relating to your anger in this way. But those questions are precisely what anger is directing you towards. So you don't want to stay with that feeling, ask yourself those questions, answer them honestly, and then let the anger speak to you with its sacred voice, because you're going to know. If you're open and you're present and you're grounded with your anger and your breathing, it's going to become clear the answers to those questions. And so finally, you want to express that anger healthfully and then resolve what needs to be resolved. So once your nervous system is regulated, you understand what the anger is trying to tell you, the message underneath. Then you want to consciously release the energy of the anger through shaking, through stomping, vocalization, or other gentle movements that are going to allow your body to discharge that mobilization energy, that tension that has built up. Then when you engage verbally or relationally, you can do so from clarity as opposed to aggression. And then that's when you can speak the truth of your needs, right? Your truth with precision, with presence. For example, like that's when you can say, when X happens, I feel Y, and I need Z to feel safe or respected or loved. And so when you express anger that way, it's not aggressive, but it's actually communicative and coherent. And that's when you can restore boundaries and connection. So when you learn to relate to your anger in a healing way, you're going to find that releasing anger doesn't just feel good, but it does restore your nervous system balance. It does clear your mind. It does create emotional freedom, and it does foster coherence because it reconnects you with your inner authority and your sovereignty and your capacity to act from presence rather than react unconsciously. So anger, again, is not a threat to your peace. It's a gateway to peace. It's sacred guidance showing you exactly where and how to reclaim your whole authentic highest self. And then you gain access to more embodied self-love, love that honors yourself completely. And then that, of course, extends outward from a place of true integrity rather than depletion and suppression. So anger never arises to cause trouble or chaos. It does arise to free you. It's the voice of your sacred boundaries, the indicator of your unmet needs, the compass that does point you directly toward your highest truths. And so when you listen, when you decode, when you express it consciously, wisely, anger really does become a constant healing ally and a self-love advocate. And you're going to learn so much about yourself when you learn to love your anger. So here's your action step for the week. I want you to carve out 15 minutes to be with yourself, by yourself, meaning alone, to love your anger. And I want you in that sacred space, in that solitude, in that quiet, to bring to mind something that you have been angry about recently, even if it is just like a frustration, because so many people deny their anger and say they're frustrated when they're actually really angry. So bring to mind something that angered you, like be honest about it, okay? Something recently that really frustrated you, angered you, and then I want you to let it softly arise in your heart space, because that is what it is protecting. That means relaxing your body to allow that feeling of anger to be soft in your body as opposed to intense. That just means that you're telling your body, I'm not resisting it anymore. I'm not judging it anymore. I'm not intimidated by it anymore. This is just energy that has surfaced to protect my well-being. And I want you to literally perceive that anger in you as a guardian and not something to be ashamed of, not something to be overwhelmed by. And I want you to just keep feeling that anger so softly, so openly in your heart space. And then I want you to thank it for protecting you. I want you to thank it for reminding you that you deserve love and respect and boundaries and freedom. And you deserve to be cherished. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be valued. And I want you to thank your anger for reminding you of that and give it love. And you're going to likely start to have an emotional release at this point. So move, shake your body, cry, let yourself grieve if grief comes up. Grieve for the anger that you didn't understand. Grieve for the needs that were not met. Grieve for the love that you didn't receive that you wanted. And just continue to thank your anger. Continue to love it. And you are going to naturally feel how that anger dissolves, how it will naturally release from your heart space because you're freeing it. So do that for 15 minutes. And when you're done, I want you to put your one hand on your heart, one hand on your belly, and take 3 deep, full breaths from your belly just to tell your body you're safe. Releasing that anger is safe. You're safe in the moment and you are free. Just keep breathing deeply. You always want to end a practice like that with reminding your body that you're safe and you want to continue to regulate. And I guarantee after that practice, you're going to begin to feel and perceive your anger so differently from that moment forward. You know, releasing anger has become an essential part of my healing, and I have grown to cherish it, to see it as the advocate for my well-being and value and values that it is. And I hope that as you learn to love your anger, you also learn to love the parts of yourself that you have been suppressing and denying, because those are the very parts of you that need your healing and your love. Anger is not a voice of contempt. It's actually a voice of love. So when you treat it like that, your anger becomes less hostile and more healing. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope this episode awakened you, inspired you, and reminded you of what's possible when you love, heal, and free yourself and reclaim your highest truth and power. If this show has transformed or enlightened your self-love, growth, and healing journey, please like, save, and share this episode and leave a positive review on Apple or Spotify. And subscribe to be reminded of new episodes. Your support is deeply appreciated and truly helps this show so much. And if today's episode resonated with you, don't stop here. Go deeper. My book, Unconditional, You Are Perfect As You Are, expands on these teachings and gives you the missing framework about self-love that no one is talking about. So get your copy today to start reading and loving yourself more. And if you're ready for the ultimate healing journey with daily instruction and guidance from me, I'd love to see you inside the Source membership, the only holistic and comprehensive step-by-step self-healing program that is proven to work. Remember, you were never meant to struggle or wait for what is already yours. It's time to claim everything you want and more. All the links are in the show notes. I'll see you next time.